Hello, everyone. So I can't see you now because those spotlights are insanely bright, but I'm sure you guys can see me. My name's Darryl Bear. I am a technical marketing manager at Epic. Basically what that means is I get to use all the awesome tools in the Epic ecosystem, and today we're going to be talking about Twinmotion and several of those tools. I'd like to thank Sam Anderson. She created the presentation, and unfortunately she's not here today, so I'm taking over for her. But it's a really lovely presentation, and she did a really great job for it. So we're going to be looking at a variety of the tools that are part of the Epic ecosystem. We're not going to go through all of them, but we're going to be covering off several of them. And Twinmotion is going to be the foundation of that kind of that journey or that story that we want to tell. And as you all are aware, there's lots of different things or different applications that are in that Epic ecosystem. So things like the reality capture and reality scan tool sets for doing photogrammetry, Sketchfab. Even the sample projects, to me, are sort of part of that Epic ecosystem. Obviously, Quixel and Artstation, Twinmotion, and Unreal kind of round it out. So it really is a very deep set of tools for doing content creation of a variety of different types. And for those of you who haven't used Twinmotion, I know this is an introductory class, it really is one of our most accessible tools, as well as like the MetaHuman Animator and things like that are web-based. It's a very, very fast content creation tool for telling stories. And it started off as a tool primarily focused on the architectural visualization kind of personas, and it's expanded now to where it's more of a generalized visualization tool, so something very similar to Keyshot, or if you're doing automotive work, something like VRED. So it has grown in its sophistication and its flexibility to do things outside of that core AEC focus that it started at. So just kind of keep that in mind for those of you who haven't used it in the past, and we'll be giving a basic overview of what it's like to work inside of that application today. So we talked about a couple of these other tools, things like RealityScan. So this is a photogrammetry tool. It works on your iPhone or on Android, and it allows you to create assets really, really quickly, right in the power of your phone. And the thing that's really cool about this tool is underneath it all, it's actually using the back end of our higher-end tool, Reality Capture. So even though it's an iPhone-based application, the back end of it is actually using Reality Capture, which is what we use to generate all of those Quixel assets, which you may or may not have downloaded in the past, but it gives you a very sophisticated set of tools. So this is just a process of creating stuff, putting a bounding box around it to kind of clip out those extra data. You can process it, send it off to Sketchfab. So that's the mechanism of getting the data off of this. It's always going to end up going to Sketchfab in the end. And then from Sketchfab, you can download it and do things with it. Now, a couple of things. As it's going through there, you saw a bunch of little icons popping up and things like that. It's giving you visual cues as to whether or not the data that you're scanning is good. Like, you don't want blurry images, so you want to try to use these visual cues, red lines, white lines, and green lines, to know whether or not the photographs are good. And then you can actually go back and say, some of these red photographs, let me throw them away. Because you can only take around 200 photographs inside of the mobile-based application. If you're using Reality Capture, you could take thousands and thousands of them. So just keep that in mind, that the mobile app is limited to around 200 photos. Now, a couple of things that you want to make sure that you're doing correctly when you're working with photogrammetry in general. Like, this isn't based just on Reality Capture or RealityScan. It's just photogrammetry in general. You want to make sure that you have a lot of overlap between your photos, right? You're trying to get a good coverage of your objects. You also want to make sure that most of the time a large portion of that object's in frame. Now, one of the things that's really interesting about Reality Capture is that initial pass you do, you don't need 80% of coverage, right? Like, the initial outer loop that you do around your geometry can be less than 60% coverage. Like, that's just establishing the overall shape. And then you're going to go back in and do more refined inner loops and kind of spiral yourself around. So start broadly, get the generalized shape of it first. That gives the algorithm a bit more to work with, and then go back and kind of fine tune and refine that. And my good colleague Louis Catali wrote a really nice paper that's on the Epic developer community about photogrammetry in general and some of the best practices. So I encourage you to go check that out. Now, a couple things that you don't want to try to do with a photogrammetry-based tool set is avoiding transparent objects, shiny objects, and translucent objects. It confuses the algorithm because it doesn't have fixed points to work with. Another good thing to do with photogrammetry is to try to have a foundation that your objects are sitting on that could potentially give the algorithm something to work with. So, like a very specific gridded pattern, almost like the equivalent of like a QR code. I'm not saying put a QR code there, but just know that if you put it on a very plain white piece of paper, it gives it, something that's a little bit more challenging than if there was some detail that the algorithm can work with to try to pop that object off of the background and isolate it so that it has a bit more of an advantage. Again, you want to avoid blurry images, panoramics, things like that. So the app is going to kind of guide you through that process, so just keep those in mind. Now, as I said, mentioned previously, once you generate this, it's going to go off the Sketchfab. From Sketchfab, you can share it. You can choose whether or not it's Creative Commons, if you want the whole world to have it, if you want to commoditize it. And from Sketchfab, you can then always download that data in the form of an FBX file or something like a GLTF file. There's lots of different ways of downloading the data after you have it, but Sketchfab is sort of our mechanism for that. So the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to jump into Twinmotion, and I'll give you guys an overview of what it's like to work with the application. And it's a very fast and easy tool to work with, very pedestrian. So let's go ahead and just close this down over here and launch that app up. I'm using the EDU version today, and the reason I'm using the EDU version versus the trial is it gives me the ability to use the cloud exporter, which we're going to talk a bit about. But there are 3 different versions or 3 different licenses. So there's a trial, an EDU version, and then a purchasable version. You can also get it bundled sometimes with things like Revit and stuff like that. So there's lots of different ways of acquiring it. So this is what you're presented with when you first launch the application. It looks like I had it up in the background here. Let's just expand this out a little bit more. What we're going to do is we're going to start with one of the templates. And we've been trying to introduce these templated workflows to give you a head start very, very quickly. So for today, we're going to be using the display, this kind of product visualization template. So I'm going to go ahead and open that. And you can see that I've already downloaded this one on the stage computer. If you see these little arrows, that means the data set's there, but you haven't downloaded it. And a lot of what's inside of Twinmotion now does sit on the cloud. And the reason we're doing that is because with Sketchfab library and the Quixel library and some of these other templates, it was really getting, it'd be terabytes of data to download everything that's on Sketchfab, right? There's 600,000 assets on there. So a lot of it is sort of, it sits on the cloud. Once you access it, it makes a local copy of it, then it's much faster to open again and again. So in this example, we're going to start off with just this product display. And it takes just a second to open, hopefully. We'll see. OK, so here we are inside of Twinmotion. And you're presented with several things. So on the left is a library. Again, that's going to be all the different assets that you can use, things like Quixel and Sketchfab and stuff like that, as well as some built-in assets that ship with the application. A lot of those assets have intelligence inside of them. There's animated people, there's trees. If you use the vegetation that's inside of Twinmotion, as you change the weather or the time of day, they all interact and work with each other. As you change the seasons, also the trees will change, and they're kind of like smart assets is the best way to think of them. Today, we're going to be focusing primarily on just a simple product visualization use cases of this. So we're going to be dressing a table, essentially, or looking at that photogrammetry-based asset that Sam did of her kitchen table and her stools. On the right-hand side is kind of basic scene outline. So your scene hierarchy, that's going to be sort of your parent structure of all of your different geometries and your lights and all the things that live in your scene. And then you have your camera effects, your rendering effects, and your environment. And what we're looking at right now is the real-time version of this. Now, this is using actually a version that's 1.2. 2.1 and 2.2 just came out. So we're one release back from what's in the preview right now. In the most recent version, it has Lumen. Like if anybody's used Unreal or heard about Lumen, it's a real-time GI and reflection system that's inside of there. This currently isn't using that, just so you guys are understanding. And we also have a path tracer. So the path tracer allows us to do very high quality final pixel outputs that can be animated or still. So there's several different approaches that you can use when you're working within the application. On the bottom, we have a toolbar that allows us to import stuff, look at the materials that are in the scene. So these aren't all the materials or the library of materials of hundreds and hundreds of materials that you may want to use. These are the ones that are actually used in the scene. The populate would be, again, to do some vegetation stuff, and then there's the media and the export. So the media button is where you can go in there and start setting up, framing your shots or creating your presentations or making animations and things like that. And we'll see a bit of that in context. So the navigation is very straightforward. You can see it's displayed up here on this top little window. You can change that if you want it to feel more like Unreal or more like Maya or Max or something like that. You can change the way the mouse buttons work and the finger coordinates and things like that. I'm just running it in its default mode. So what we want to do is I'm just going to go ahead and jump back into the media. And this started off as a template. So if we go into the media, you can see right off the bat, it brings up this dock that kind of flows up the bottom, right? So inside of media, then we have several different types of medias that we can create. So right now we're looking at the image section of this. And this ships in the template. And what these images are is they're really like scene snapshots. They're like the state of the scene at a given moment. That's the best way to think of what an image is. Obviously, it can be output into an image that's like a JPEG or something like that. But these actually are still very much live. Like if I click on image 2, I can still move this around. It's not an actual still. It's just the snapshot of that scene, and it's the full snapshot of the scene. So if I jump back to image 1, you can see that it's turning on and off different objects inside of the scene graph. So it's remembering the visibility state, the lighting state, everything, the weather state, everything that could be recorded, the camera, any effects you have on that camera. That's all going to be recorded into that actual image. So in the template, there's several different styles and things that you can look at, just to kind of get a sense of what's going on with that. Now, another thing that you can do is you can create movies. So if we click on the movie button, there's no movie media inside of here. So how do you make a movie? Well, it's actually very simple and straightforward to do inside of Twinmotion. It's just a process of clicking the plus sign. So as soon as I click the plus sign, it goes ahead and it loads into my timeline. It's like a keyframe, right? That's my first keyframe of my movie. So all I have to do is if I want to get another keyframe, like say I just want to do a pull out to reveal a bit more of the environment. Just pull out a little bit, click the plus button. As soon as I do that, I've now made an animation. It's that simple. So everything inside of Twinmotion is driven on this idea of very, very fast storytelling tools, right? Like everything's kind of a click away. That's sort of the premise of the application. So underneath it all, it's got this amazing power, right? It's using the power of the Unreal Engine with this very accessible user interface. And as I mentioned before, the most current trial that we have is getting more and more tied to Unreal Engine. It has things like Lumen. It has the path tracer, which came out a couple of releases ago. It actually has the ability to start to do more and more things that Unreal can do as far as like the architectural, the big blocks, the big things we're doing in the editor now can more quickly get into Twinmotion because they're more closely tied. The legacy version of Twinmotion was basically like a compiled game. It was like the visualization game that someone made that had a few buttons in it. And it was very hard for us to be as close to the power that Unreal had because you had to basically rebuild and recompile that game. Now what we've got is Twinmotion is tied to Unreal. It's almost like a mode of Unreal, so we can much quicker get the power that Unreal has as new things are introduced into it. So just keep that in mind moving forward. You're going to see things like Nanite eventually will show up inside of here and stuff like that. Like we're starting with Lumen, which is great, but it'll continue to evolve and grow. So let's say I wanted to change that first keyframe, right? Like if I come back here and I'm like, oh, you know what? I want a little rotation in there. I can always just move something around, kind of push it over a little bit, reframe this, maybe even push it a little tighter on it, something like that. And all I have to do to refresh it is just click this little rewind button. So I've now changed what that first keyframe is. So that's how you make really fast and simple animation. So the next one down the line is going to be panoramas. Then there's presentations, or panorama sets, and then there's presentations. So the panoramas are really cool. They allow you to make a 360 video. When you make panorama sets, it will have multiple 360 videos that have this sort of nice transitional effect that happen between them. So these are very lightweight and easy to share for people who don't have powerful computers, right? Like once you create a 360 panorama or a panorama set, it's going to be able to show up on the cloud or in a web browser, and you'll be able to send links off to your clients or colleagues for very, very fast review, and they could watch it on any device that has a web browser. So kind of keep that in mind. Presentations again are it's about telling the story. So if you want to create a presentation, it's really fast and simple to do, right? It allows you to take any of the media that you've previously generated and choreograph it into a story, right? Like it's a really good storytelling tool. So it's a very similar process to what we did to create that animation. You click the plus button. Inside of that, then you're going to say, okay, we want to make a presentation. Let's click the plus button over here. What do I want to do? Well, I want to cycle through all these images. Great, we'll drop those down there. But I also want to interject into that like an establishing shot of like the turntable, or maybe I wanted to use that at the end of it. So I can just drop that in anywhere I want. And now if I click the play button, we can close this down here, you're going to see that it's going to go through and just run through that. You could change the time of that if it was too long or something like that, obviously. But then it's just going to start going through these stills as that time slider goes. So the idea is you can it's almost like a really powerful PowerPoint, right? This presentation you can save and then give to someone. And the thing that's so cool about it is it's not just a still, right? The presentation is still that live scene. So if you bake this down into a presentation and you share it with someone and put it on the cloud, they will also have the ability to be like, oh, that's amazing. Let me tumble around and see what the back of that object looks like, right? So it's super, super powerful, right? So the next thing that we want to talk about is a couple of the things that you can do from like a look development standpoint, right? So if we grab this guy and we bring up the materials for it, these are all the different materials that live inside of the inside of the scene on this object. You can also import in objects from the library. So let's talk about that really quickly before we export some stuff out. And the import in the library has a whole variety of things. It's broken down into different categories. So these are going to be all of these different materials that exist inside of Twinmotion. And again, they're really intelligent, right? Like if you put something like the car paint on a car and you go through the seasons and you say it's wintertime and snow comes, the car will actually get snow on it and things like that. So they're very, very intelligent in the way they're set up. Some other things that are kind of cool about this is the ability to import in data. So let's go ahead and go back to, let's get out of our media. Let's get back over here just to these guys and get back to a still. And let's drag in an object into this scene really, really quickly. So if we go over to something like Megascans and go into 3D assets and go into building, and you're gonna laugh at this, I think it's kind of funny. The only one that I've downloaded was the first one on the left-hand side, because there's thousands of them in there, and I didn't want to have to wait to download something and I'd forget which one it was. But with that done, you can see this one doesn't have an arrow next to it. This other modular balcony does. So that means it hasn't been downloaded. But once you've downloaded the data, it's just that simple. Drag it, drop it in, position it, rotate it, start dressing your scene, and that's going to allow you to work with the data in a very high level very, very quickly. Same thing for Sketchfab, right? So if we want to go back to our library and go into Sketchfab, there's, last time I checked, I think 600,000 assets on Sketchfab. That is all visible and searchable right here, right? Like if I wanted to, I don't know, grab something like silly like a fish, right? Just click fish, and then that's all the different fishes that other people have uploaded into Sketchfab or artists have made into Sketchfab, and you can go through and find them. Something that maybe came from that reality capture that Sam did. If I just search for Anderson table, you're going to see there's the table that Sam did with Photogrammetry, and they're downloadable, and then you can basically drag and drop them into your scene. So the whole power of that sort of epic ecosystem data set or library of assets is right here, searchable, directly inside of the application. So very, very powerful. So that's basically how you go through and you start to add things into a scene. So the export process that we talked about just a second ago is, again, just a click away. Very, very simple to do, right? So if you go into export, it shows up here on the right-hand side. We're going to say, if we want to send something to the cloud, you click on the Presentation Plus button. That would let me send it out to the cloud. That's the one presentation that we just made. So with that done, I could push this up into the cloud if I wanted to, right? Very, very straightforward. So just come over here and say Start Export. It's going to send it to the cloud. If you wanted to export out images, or the local export would be to create media, right? So if you do an image or a video, those are going to be traditional linear media, stills that you've rendered out that could be done with the path tracer if you wanted to. They'd be higher quality, or videos, so like MP4s, right? Again, they could be done with the real-time renderer or with the Pixel, very high fidelity ray traced path tracer. If you click on presentation, what it's going to actually save out locally is going to be an exe. It's going to be an executable that you can give to somebody that they can then open on their computer and play around with and look at. Now keep in mind that if you've done something that's very heavy in data and you give it to somebody who's on like a 14-year-old computer, it's not going to be the best experience for them. So when we do a presentation, that's basically making a game of that media or that presentation that you've generated. So they will have the ability to interact with it. It'll play for them when they hit the play button and go out through the keyframes that you've set or the media the way you've queued it or sequenced it would play. But at any time they could stop that presentation and start to explore the scene from that moment on. So just keep that in mind. So for the export out to the cloud, if we say start export, it's going to generate the data, and then it's going to upload it. And I think we have a pretty decent connection here. We'll see. We'll see how long it takes. I've actually done this already, so I'm just going to go ahead and click the Open Twinmotion Cloud button, and you can see we have presentation 1 in here twice. So I didn't name my presentation, so now we're going to have a third. You're going to see a third presentation 1 pop in here in just a second, because again, I'm a demo guy and I'm not naming things very well apparently today. So unfortunately, it's the same presentation name over and over. But there it is. Look, another presentation 1 just done today. But this one has a balcony in it, and it's got that original framing that happened. You can see that it's letterbox and that original framing that's happened from the fact that we started that from those images. So if we just double click on this guy, actually we'll just go into this one since it's already open. You can view it, or you can copy the QR codes or the links, or you can embed this. So again, it's very easy for you to take this and start to share it with people, right? That's really kind of the idea behind it. So if we just jump over here, I think if I scroll down on this guy, this is a presentation that Sam had pushed off to the web earlier. So again, this is in Twinmotion Cloud, like what we were just in, and you can see that there's a UI on the right-hand side that allows you to select the media that's inside of that presentation and play that media back. So very, very fast and easy, and anyone with basically like a modern web browser can view these guys and kind of go through it. This is a slightly more worked up piece. There's a bit more happening here where it's the full table. That's the table that she was doing the photogrammetry on just a second ago. So let's go ahead and click down. You can also send the Twinmotion Cloud over to Artstation, right? So this is basically the ability to take that and, let's actually go back here and click down on this guy. I think if I click on this and then click it down again, it'll play it back. The QR codes are basically really fast and easy, so you can snap. Like if I was giving a presentation here in the audience and I pulled the QR code up, you guys could photograph it and then have access to that directly on your phone. So a couple of other things that you can do with Twinmotion, now that we've established how fast and easy it is and how quick it is to work with. If you want to expand beyond what Twinmotion can do, right? So Twinmotion's really great at making linear media and telling stories. It has a really nice staging tool, so if you were trying to do like a construction staging of a building or something like that, that's all there. But if you need to create a experience, right? Something a bit more like a configurator for a car, or an apartment configurator, or you wanted to tell a story with a bit more sophisticated animation or something like that, you probably would want to get that data out and into Unreal, because Unreal is, it's a Swiss Army knife. You can do anything in Unreal if you have enough time and enough money, right? Like you guys have seen the stuff that's done in Unreal. It can get pretty insane. So what we have the ability to do is export out a Datasmith file. So Datasmith it also imports data with Datasmith, right? So Datasmith is a file transfer technology that's made by Epic. So think of it as like FBX on steroids, right? So it's just a very robust, sophisticated file exporter. And Unreal can bring Datasmith files in. So you can export out of the Datasmith file and then bring that Datasmith file into Unreal. And to do that, you're going to need to download the Datasmith Twinmotion content. So a lot of that weather system stuff that we talked about and all the different materials and all the libraries, that data gets plugged into Unreal so that when it brings in that datasmith file, it basically has a one-to-one counterpart of the original data that was inside of Twinmotion, right? So you kind of need to download that and install the plugins into Unreal first for it to actually work. So here is, again, the same sort of idea. It was based off of that template, and we got some coplanar polygons there, so let's just drop that background template back a little bit. So photogrammetry-based data made on the phone, and then this was essentially just sort of dressed and put together using a variety of the different assets that are inside of the library. So a lot of these different object assets, these primitive shapes, or I'm sorry, not primitive shapes, we don't want to do that. We want to do something like home stuff, and let's go grab, I don't know, kitchen. Put some more food on the table here. Let's drag this bagel out and put that there, because who doesn't want a bagel? Yeah, so that's basically how this was done, right? Photogrammetry in, drag and drop all these different assets from a variety of places, Sketchfab, Quixel, the stuff that ships with Twinmotion, generate a story, and then you're going to go, and if you want to refine, or not refine it, if you want to further expand beyond the capabilities that Twinmotion has and create a custom experience for someone, a more sophisticated story maybe than you could tell inside of Twinmotion, you would just do File, Export, and you'd save this out as a datasmith file. So then once you've done that, let me go launch Unreal, and I'll show you what this data set looks like inside of Unreal here. So as I mentioned before, you need to make sure that you have the plugins installed, the datasmith importer. I started this project, this Unreal project, with the architecture template. So Unreal also has templates, and when you start a project in Unreal with a template, it basically pre-configures a bunch of plugins. So the datasmith plugin was already turned on, but if it wasn't turned on and you needed to turn it on, you can just go to Projects, Plugins, and then search for datasmith, and there's a whole bunch of them. But like I said before, they are all on by default if you've started from the AEC template. So this is what it looks like inside of Unreal. Let's hide that guy. We don't want that there. Go away, dude. It's basically the same thing. So all those cameras are inside of there. The lights are inside of there. And all the data set is directly translated across, and it's just here, ready for you to begin building some custom bespoke experience for your clients or for your needs. And that's basically the Epic ecosystem. So we talked about reality capture and a couple of different tools that we have to do that photogrammetry workflow. We talked about Sketchfab, and that's where that reality capture stuff goes, as well as hundreds of thousands of assets that other artists have been uploading to there. It's a very extensive library of stuff that's, again, all accessible directly inside of Twinmotion. Quixel, another data set that's at your disposal as being part of the Epic ecosystem that's directly inside of that UI. We talked about the presentation tools inside of Twinmotion, how fast and single-click workflow it's set up. It's so great. And the thing that's so cool about this is we're seeing a lot of people that were traditional Unreal users coming and saying, you know what, we want to implement Twinmotion into our workflow because it's so fast and because we can iterate and prototype. So art departments in the film industry, lots of people are using Twinmotion to prototype things inside of there very, very quickly, and then they're exporting it off into Unreal if they need to further expand it. Same thing in the automotive space. We're starting to see a lot of traction where you can have a whole bunch of people. It's like a gateway drug into 3D, right? Anyone could sit down and be up to speed in Twinmotion in a matter of a day. It's super, super accessible, but it has the ability to work with all these other tools that we talked about, and I think that's about it. Well, thanks for your time, everybody.